How comfortable would you be having your thoughts recorded? In the next part of the journey of our soul, we look at something called the life review. Don't get scared. Listen to this episode instead. Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully, How to Bring Meaning, Joy and Love into Your Life based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot, and host of the Power Up podcast, where we share relatable insights to upgrade your everyday life. The life review. So for those of you that were either here last week or listened last week, one of the things we spoke about people that have near-death experiences and how there's four, not everyone who has a near-death experience experiences all these four, but there's four common elements of what people experience, which people who experience a near-death experience would experience one or two or three of those different elements. And we saw how they kind of lined up with what the Jewish sources tells us about what happens to the soul after life and the body. And we looked at the first three kind of last week, and I said we're going to leave the life review to this week because it's a big enough topic on its own. So what is the life review? Often experienced by people who have experienced it, right, who have had a near-death experience and then recovered, as having their entire life flash before their eyes. When you hear that, how does it sound to you?
Depressing.
All right, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I hear it's always I always tell my kids, like when they're afraid to do something, it's like you're gonna have more regrets of things that you don't try or don't do than things that you do. And even if you mess up, because I see it as like all these things happen, but then you could have done more. So it's like, like you're mad about what you did wrong, but then you're also mad about what you didn't do.
All right.
So I had a meeting with someone that I haven't seen in years, and she reminded me, I had no idea. She told me, it's like, oh, and then this thing. I apparently years ago had written her a note and included it in a bracelet when she was having a difficult time in her business, and it sustained her to the extent that she stayed in her business, and she's one of the highest performing people that I know. And I was just like, and she was, I had no idea, and B, didn't remember that I had done that. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that that's my life review. It's like moments like that,
Right.
As opposed to all of the other things that I don't like, the unintended consequences of my actions that not necessarily as positive.
Anyone a little bit intimidated about it?
Oh, 100%.
In your life, are you seeing it from only your point of view? Are you seeing it from the point of view of the people you impacted, good or bad? That makes a big difference.
And I also envision it as sort of and maybe this is the second step, and maybe not the flashing part, but like a comparison of this is what you did and this is what your potential was that you could do.
I had it at 15, and as I mentioned before, in a swimming pool, and I thought I was going to drown, and the way it appeared to me was it was just everything flashing before me, only 15 years worth. But that's what it was like. It just went before my eyes.
What did you see?
It was like watching a movie, but very fast. I mean, that's how I recall it.
So I'll share with you a story that really stuck out to me in this book that's from Life After Life by, I think it's Dr. Moody, who's done a ton of research on near-death experiences. And if I've said this story to you before, I apologize, but it's powerful. So this is a woman, Elizabeth, who has a near-death experience. What happens is that she's crossing the road and she gets hit by a car, and she's medically dead for a certain amount of time. The paramedics come, they take her to hospital, and thank God she recovers. And someone asked her afterwards, they were asking her afterwards about her near-death experience and what it was like. And she said a couple of things that she experienced. She experienced this out-of-body experience that, she could see herself, right? And she described what the paramedics were doing while she was still on the pavement and how they were trying to bring her back to life. And it was accurate, right? Like it lined up with what the paramedics were actually doing. And she also said that she had a flashback of her whole life. And she said that it was fascinating. Why? Because she didn't experience it from her own perspective, but she experienced it from like kind of like an outside perspective. She gives a story. She says a few months before the accident, she was going grocery shopping. She was a young woman, she's in her 20s, she's going to the grocery shop. On the way home, she was going to go to the gym later. She's rushing through the grocery store and she hears a little girl crying. And she looks around and there's like a 4-year-old kid and she's crying and she stops and she's like, she turns to the little girl and she's like, what's the matter? And she's like, I can't find my mommy. So she says, okay, fine. And she says, come with me. She takes her to customer services and they make an announcement over the PA that there's a little girl here. If the mom's in store, can you come? And Elizabeth waits with this little girl. Like a minute and a half later, the mother comes back. The girl rushes into the mother's arms and whatever. She goes, right, and she doesn't really think much about it. Like when you think about a story like that, was it nice of Elizabeth to do something like that? Yeah, like how nice on a scale of 1 to 10?
7. Depends on your perspective.
Well, I mean, on our perspective, if you did that, like how much?
A minute and a half of your time, like at the end of the day, is going to be something that you're not going to remember next week if you did that.
Yeah, you would probably go home and like someone would ask you how was your day, and you'd probably go through what the work meeting you had and whatever in the gym class, and you may or may not remember it, right? It's not really like something like you'd be like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear this amazing thing that I did today, right? But it's not something that we would kind of be like, wow, that's incredible. So she had this near-death experience, and she experiences this story again in her flashback. This time, she doesn't experience it as Elizabeth rushing through the grocery store. She experiences it as the little girl, right? And we put ourselves in the mind of a 4-year-old girl who's lost in the grocery store, right? And complete panic because she probably thinks like, oh my, like she's 4. She doesn't know if she's ever gonna find her mum again, and like complete panic. What am I gonna do? And then this complete stranger comes over to her and like saves her and waits with her until her mum comes back and literally saves her life. And she said when she recovered from that near-death experience, she says it totally changed the way she lives her life. Why? Because she recognized there that this small, ordinary act that she did for Elizabeth, for that little girl in the grocery store, which hardly made a blip on her radar right before the accident, was such an incredible act of kindness to that 4-year-old girl that she couldn't look at ordinary acts the same or ordinary opportunities the same way. And I think what Jessica, you told us is the same thing, right? Like you gave that bracelet to this other person. And do you remember giving the bracelet?
I had no, she mentioned it a few times and I just like, and then she explained it to me and I was like, I still don't remember it, but it sounds like something that I would have done.
Right. You don't remember it.
Yeah.
And it literally changed the trajectory of her life, right? And I can tell you, I've got a story like that in my book of how I did that for someone else, and to this day, I do not remember the conversation that this person told me about. I remember a conversation that I had with a friend who, when I was 16 or so, and I bet she doesn't remember because I keep forgetting to tell her about it, that changed the trajectory of my life, right? We all have these small little incidents that happen that we do, and we kind of go on with our day, and we don't necessarily know the impacts of it, right? So when we talk about the life review, and the Torah talks about it, let me ask you a question. Who testifies for us, for example? Like, if God's saying this and that the other happens, is are the angels that come up and kind of say, well, who's supposed to do it?
I thought it was our ministers.
So it's really our soul. It's kind of like someone you spoke about a video camera. It's kind of like a videotape. It's kind of like our soul reviews it, right? Now, in this world, our brain, one of the big functions of our brain is it acts as a filter, right? And it filters out so much. If you could hear everything that was going on at the moment, you wouldn't be able to hear me because you'd hear the cars outside and you would hear the cloud outside. And if you noticed everything, right? So the brain sort of acts as a filter, which helps us function. And it also gives us a very narrow perspective of the world, right? Our perspective, which it helps us function, and it's sometimes good and sometimes it misleads us, right? The world's come when the soul, and I think Jenny said this, when the soul leaves the body, it doesn't have that brain as filter anymore. And so the soul testifies about our life review, right? The soul kind of plays that video camera of our life. And there we can see the reality of it, right? We can see the reality of our actions and the impact of our actions. Now, is that a pleasurable or a painful experience?
Depends on the actions, you know.
It depends on the actions you have, right? You hear that you gave someone a bracelet and it changed, and and it encouraged them. That's great. You hear that you said something not nice to someone and they decided to quit their career because of it. It's like, ooh, ouch, right?
I don't know, I'm guessing that like there you no longer interpret it as pain or pleasure. Like it's just this is like that. This is like your soul story of your life. This is it. Like you're not like, oh, that was bad. This is good. You know, I don't know. I'm just
Okay. So we're really a very good point, and I want to spend some time going through the rest of it and then coming back to this. I think it'll become clearer a little bit once we understand a few things before it, right? So um and I think it's a good question you ask. I don't know if you're asking as a question or a statement, but I think it's a very good point. Like, what is the soul experiencing? So in order to kind of understand that, let's go back and try and understand this, right? What is this life review about? Why do we have a life review at the end of our life? Right? Why do our actions matter? One of there's 13 foundational principles in Judaism. They're called 13 principles of faith. One of them is that there is reward and punishment, right? Every action that we have, that we do, has a consequence. If it's a good action, God rewards us. If it's a negative action, God and a person doesn't repair that action, God punishes us. And it says that one of the principle of faith says He's fashioned every heart. He pays attention to all their deeds, talking about human beings. Why does God care what we do? Why does He pay attention to what I do? And I'll give you an analogy to make the question either easier or harder, whichever way you want to look at it, right? I was walking on Shabbat with my 6 and 4-year-olds, and they were telling me all about the ants, right? Like we were talking about ant hills and ants and this, that, and the other. And besides when you're interacting with small children, how much attention do you pay to ants?
Not much.
If they're outside our house, not at all. Why? Fascinating. Hang out with my sister. Why don't we pay attention to ants?
Because our mind, we're focusing on like getting from A to B, or our mind is like full of other thoughts. We're not in the present moment. Kids are so much in the present moment, like all the time, like everything around them, and we're always thinking like either before, after, whatever.
Yes. And also, if I can be brutally honest, we don't really care about it, right? If I'm right to say, we care about the ants, right? Like the night comes and we step in the right state, like, do we care? We don't, right? Now, if we think about it, why am I talking about ants? Because as human beings, we are so much bigger, greater than ants, correct? Now, if you want to compare the ratio of human beings to God's, right? God is also so much more, greater, more powerful, and the ratio is probably way bigger, right? The difference between a human and an ant is way smaller probably than the difference between a human being and God, right? There's billions of people in the world. I don't know what the exact number nowadays is, right? billions of people in the world. Why should God care? We're like ants, like just like ants are to humans. We are probably like ants to God, and yet God what a principle of Jewish faith is God notices everything we do and think as well, right? Why?
Because we each have a purpose and a mission, so he wants to, we were here, each person's put here for an individual reason, so we're supposed to be fulfilling what we're here for, and God is telling us whether we did or not.
Okay, so we're here for a purpose, and right, and on a very simple level, think about the people or the things that you notice or take notes of what they do in your life.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
He cares. Exactly. On a very simplistic level, the fact that God notices what we do is because God cares about us, right? The more we care about someone, the more we care. We notice what they do, right? Think about it. Think about, someone that you barely know, right? And they show you're in the dentist and they show up half an hour late for their appointment. Do you care?
No.
No, you don't really care, right? Now think about a best friend and you have a date and they show up half an hour late for your date. Do you care?
Yeah.
Oh boy, you care, right? That's really the story. Like if you really cared, then you'd be on time, whatever, right? Which is another thing. But the more we care about someone, the more we notice what they do. Now, for us, the first thing to bear in mind when we think about the life review, when we think about accountability for our actions, is to understand that this should give us confidence, right? It should give us great confidence because the master of the world who created this incredibly diverse, huge, abundant world with tons, billions of people cares about what you do, right? To the point that God even cares, the Torah even tells us, like, he cares which shoe we put on first. That's how much we matter and we care to him, right? So if you're having like confidence problems, remember that, right? It's an incredible idea, and it's a truth that we matter. And it's not just like, oh, we matter because like we matter, but it's I'm going to borrow Jessica's story again. We matter in a very real sense because the actions that we take, whether we see the impact or not, have an impact. They have an impact on ourselves. They have an impact on our community. They have an impact on the people around us, and it's a real thing that we impact. And it should give us like a pause for, on the one hand, like, wow, this is a confidence thing, and on the other hand, it's also a responsibility. Now, we said that God cares about actions and our thoughts. Why does God care about our thoughts? And then I'm going to ask you another question. Who's happy to have their thoughts recorded?
Well, our thoughts do influence our actions.
I'm thinking about my actions, absolutely. But somehow.
Go to like 1984.
No,
Because it has to do with intent. So like if you do an action, like I just played a tennis match and it was like someone hit this really great shot that no one could get. And she's like, oh, that was just such good luck. So she didn't really intend to hit it that way, but it worked out. Versus someone that hits a really good point, then you feel really good about it because you wanted it to hit that corner and it went there.
okay.
I think, with our thoughts though, I don't know, like I'm doing a lot of meditating recently, and a big part of that is like recognizing that your thoughts are separate from you, correct? Like that's the point of mindfulness is I am not my thoughts are separate, and I can influence my thoughts. So to be recording your thoughts, like the intent is there, but your thoughts aren't necessarily who you are at your core. They're like so ego.
And that's actually going the opposite way.
Yeah.
In my perception, I was thinking like your thoughts are a reflection of your inner essence, your inner personality of what you choose to focus on.
But like
No one else knows or cares, but it's where you are residing and where you are acting from.
Because God says he commands us, and this is something that a king or a ruler can't command you to do. He commands us not to hold a grudge. So you can have all these negative thoughts about your neighbor that pissed you off about something, a fence argument, whatever, and they can never know. But God's saying you're not allowed to hold a grudge, so you're not even allowed to be angry at someone.
That's probably a similar example of where I was coming from. Like, are you the type of person that is holding a grudge and mean and nasty and thinking negative things about the people, even if you don't act on it, right? On the outside, of course, you're not going to act on those things. But on the inside, you're thinking it. And it's
How
still
does
a reflection of his
I think it makes, so the emotion, I think most of us, I would say, if you're in this room, you're probably a good person. So if you're thinking it on the inside, how does that make? Yeah. That's like, so I'm thinking mean, nasty thoughts about my neighbor, and I would never think mean, nasty thoughts about my neighbors. Right, give us.
It's not really like, I'm the neighbor right now, I'm thinking that, that's what I do.
So they say the rabbi
Stephanie,
Yeah, so you have these thoughts, but then the secondary thought, at least for me, and maybe it's because I'm an overthinker, my secondary thought is, what kind of person are you that you're having these mean, nasty thoughts about your neighbor? That's where I'm saying, like, that secondary voice, that secondary thought is more me than the first thought.
hearing, I think, honestly,
is more you.
Oh,
but,
interesting.
what I'm hearing here is a slight discomfort with the accountability. Is anyone here uncomfortable with the thought of being accountable for our thoughts?
Yes.
Right. And what I'm kind of hearing is and there's a disagreement because we all have conflicting thoughts, right? We have the thought that like, okay, yeah, I should, I don't know, forgive my neighbor for, I don't know what did your neighbor do, right?
Probably the neighbor that everyone like that, yeah.
Right, well, I should forgive my neighbor, and the other one's like, no, I should, the other thought, and so the question that I want to ask basically is, are we accountable for all our thoughts? Like there's a level of discomfort here because sometimes like our thoughts pop into our head, right? Is it fair that we get that we should be held accountable for all our thoughts?
Have you ever had the moment when you've had a thought pop out, and this is specifically for you, Julie, you ever had a thought that popped into your head, that initial thought, and you're sitting with it and then you step back and you think, that's not true. There's no truth in that thought that's living in my head. I don't believe that thought. I mean, that's a thing.
So this is what we are, and I'll come to you in a sec, and Wanda. This is what we are and what we're not held accountable for. For the first thought that pops into your head, we are not accountable for, right? Because it could be just coming from God. It could be it's more complicated. We're not going to go into it right now. But the first thought that comes into our head, we are not accountable for, right? If your neighbor does something and you think like, oh my gosh, I am going to show him or her exactly what, right? What they're owed. That thought you're not. We're only accountable for thoughts that we cultivate, right? Now there's three different ways that we can cultivate thoughts. We cultivate thoughts by thinking about them, by focusing on them. We cultivate thoughts by speaking about them, and we cultivate thoughts by acting on them, right? So I think Jessica said this, but you're right. When our thoughts can't, when our thoughts, and we're not our options either, right? Who we are in essence is a divine soul, right? And we choose how to we have choices. Thoughts come into our head, but then we have a choice. Do I just let that thought pass? Or do I focus on it, right? I'm thinking about this neighbor and how mad I am. Do I just kind of let it go and question that thought and say, well, is it true that I'm, or do I just let it go? Or do I sit there and plot about how I'm going to get back at them? Right? Or do I sit there and just nurse that hurt? And again, I'm simplifying it for this thing, right? But do I actually do it? And I don't know, park in front of her driveway to get back at her, right? Do I take action? Do I talk about it to other people, right? And many of the thoughts that we can't create are we responsible for. Now, the thing is that when we hear this idea that God knows our thoughts, it can be uncomfortable, but it's actually very, very reassuring. Why? Because the phrase doesn't say he knows our hearts. It says he's fashioned our hearts, right? Now, what does it mean that God has fashioned our hearts? It means that God has kind of made our heart, right? Which means he knows us, right? He knows how badly we want to do well, right? He knows our highest intention. He knows our struggle, right? Imagine, you know how sometimes how jewelry is made is they have like a mold, right? And then they put the jewelry into the mold, and that's how you get the pendants or whatever it is. Now, someone who knows, understands these things can look at the mold and see what the jewelry is going to look. This is what it means that God has fashioned our heart, right? God has created our hearts with things that we find easier and things that we struggle with, right? Some people never struggle with holding a grudge. Some people nurse hurts for a long time. Some people have endless amounts of patience, right? Some people are very quick, right? We all have our different struggles. Now, those areas of struggles are our potential for greatness, right? And when we overcome that, then that is our areas of greatness. So when it says that God fashions our hearts and knows our thoughts, what that means is He created our deficiencies, right? So when you fail, or someone fails, right, and they lose their temper, God knows how much they didn't want to lose their temper. God knows how much of a struggle that is for them, and God knows how much effort they put into it, right? So God created us human. Now, why does God challenge us with all these negative thoughts and negative influences in our life?
So we can grow.
So we can grow, right? And I'll give you another analogy. Let's just say I said to you, I've got an offer for you guys. I've got this machine that can take all your like gold, all your broken gold jewelry and turn it into diamonds. Very expensive machine, and it takes 5, 6, 7 years for the process to work. Are you interested in it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll talk after the car. Machine. It turns your silver, any bit of silver, right? Silver's a bit cheaper, turns it into diamonds. Also expensive, takes time, but you can turn all your silver into diamonds. Interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
What about if I tell you it can take all the trash in your house and turn it into diamonds?
Okay.
Lunch.
The conversation with person, the amount of return on investment is amazing. I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
that was you can sell those diamonds. You're sitting in that on the right? I don't know. It's going. No, take 100 a week.
My mind just goes to, that's something else for me to do.
Yeah, I'm saying it. I'm thinking one of those and I have to I continue this is life, right? Like God has given us this life, and we all have our own like what we call trash, right? We're our own strangles, our own things that we would rather not have. We want to just get rid of it. Really, what life is an opportunity to take those things that we struggle with and turn them into diamonds, right? They turn them into, and we see it even in this world, right? If you think about the people that inspire us, I'm gonna take someone that I think inspires us all nowadays, right? It's Rachel Goldberg Pump, right? You've all heard of her? Why does she inspire us so much? Because she's been dealt the most horrific situation, and she handles it with such dignity, right? She's taken. I don't even want to call it trash because it's not trash. It's worse than trash, right? And she's inspiring to all of us because she's shown us the dignity, the potential of a human being to act like a human being in even the worst circumstances. And each of us in our own life have have things like, right? It's, please God, it should all be like smaller things and more pleasant things, but we have things, right? Whether it's our own character, parts of our character that we need to work on, whether it's our own life circumstances that we have to work on. And what life is an opportunity to take that thing and develop our greatness from it. And I think the thing that trips us up often is we misdefine success. Sorry, we define success properly. How to define success? What is success?
Well, achieving a goal is like the basic.
But that's what we say. That's what we say success is that you achieve a goal, that's great, right? That's not what it is. It's how much effort we put into potentially overcoming the problem. That's what it is.
Even if we don't like succeed.
Well, but I guess that's the question, is that succeeding?
That is.
If you don't.
One of the spine signs of the people, it's not. Yes, sometimes it's what they've succeeded. Like we could again, look at Rachel Goldberg one. Is it that she's got her son back? We want that for her, absolutely. But what inspires us is how much effort she's put into handling the situation, right? And that's what God counts as our success, right? Is how much effort we put into potentially overcoming the problem. And if we could really understand this mindset, right, it would help us in life so much, right? You've got your thing that you're working on. Doesn't matter if it takes 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or even a whole lifetime, right? Every single time you put in effort, that is success. So to sum up what we kind of discussed today, we discussed this idea that at the end of a person's life, a person's soul, right, gives a testimony to God and about their life. Now, what is that? What does that feel like? Well, it depends. But before we even talk about what it feels like, we have to understand that the fact that we do that is only because God cares about us, right? God cares about each one of us, and He's given us a mission, and that's what, and He's fashioned us, right? So He knows not just our actions, but He knows our intent, and He knows how much we want and how much we struggle to do that. So what is it like? So there's a story, and I'm going to end with this. There's a story that's told someone who wants to know what is the world to come like. So he's taken on a tour, right? A tour of heaven and hell. So they take him into heaven, and he goes in and he sees this beautiful table with this crystal and like beautiful tablecloths and this delicious smells, and everyone's sitting down at the table, at this banquet table, delicious food, laden with food, and everyone is having the best time, right? They're enjoying themselves. But this is heaven, great. And then they take him into hell, and he walks in, and he's like, hold on a second. The room looks exactly the same. Tables set beautifully, the best china, the smell of the food is delicious, the table laden with food, and everyone is sitting there absolutely miserable. And he looks a little bit closer. He's like, why is everyone miserable? And then he sees what the problem is. He sees that everybody is sitting at the table and their cutlery, their forks and their knives are too long. So they can't feed themselves. So they're sitting at this most delicious banquet, they're smelling the delicious food, and they starve, right? Because they can't eat anything. And he's told this is hell. So what's the difference, right? Is it in heaven that they have shorter cutlery, and they take him back into heaven? He takes a look, and he's like, no, cutlery is the same. What's the difference? Here, everyone is feeding the person across the table, right? Their forks are too long to feed themselves. No problem. We feed the person across the table. So he says, why don't the people in hell do the same thing? So he says, this is the difference, right? The people in heaven are people who on earth develop themselves into givers. So they get into heaven, They see that they can't feed themselves to the cutlery, and so they do what they're used to doing, which is giving to other people. The people in hell are people who in this world were just takers. And they get into the world to come and they can't give because they never get that part of themselves. Now, what's the analogy of the story? The analogy of the story is two parts to it. Is that number one, we're in this world to develop ourselves into givers. But number two, it's what is heaven, what is hell? It totally depends on your life, right? If a person has lived a life and taken advantage of our opportunities and done what they could and tried to fix their mistakes, they get into the next world and it's happy because it's like, wow, I have this incredible opportunity, I used it, well done. Right? If someone has wasted life, right, wasted opportunities, hurt other people, right, done negative things, destroyed the world with their actions, they're faced with the reality of what they did, and that's incredibly painful, right? Now there is a restorative process to it. We'll talk about that another week as well. But why is it painful then? Is because you can't fix it, right? Nowadays, in life, when we realize we made a mistake, it's painful and we know that we can fix it, right? There's a way we can, if we hurt someone else, we can go and apologize. We can try and make up to them, right? We did something between us and God. There's a process to fix it and repairing that as well. The world to come, there isn't that. So that is really why life is such a precious opportunity. And in future weeks, we'll talk about the restorative power of what we call punishments.
Thank you for spending your time listening. If you enjoyed this, you'll love my new book, Living Beautifully, which you can get now with the code AVOTE25 for 25% off. I'll include the link and the coupon code in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and please subscribe, share, rate and review the podcast to help us grow.